In my previous video, I mentioned that Pope Leo XIII had a vision where, according to witnesses, he heard Satan boast that he could destroy God's church. God replied, "My church is imperishable." Satan said, "Grant me a century, 75 to 100 years, power to those who will serve me, and I will destroy it." Our Lord conceded, granting him the 20th century. Considering that the chaos and destruction of the 20th and our century are far greater than in any previous century, it is not too hard to conclude that we are within the time period of Satan's reign. But the duration of that reign, in my opinion, is questionable. The stated 100-year duration of Satan's reign was what witnesses claim Leo mentioned when he had his vision. This duration cannot be claimed as written in stone, since Leo himself never spoke publicly or in writing about the incident. We can also at least raise the question, when did the gates of hell crack open? Or when did the reign begin? I can honestly say I don't know. I'm no theologian or historian. My guess is as good as any other person's. But here is something curious that I came across. During Pope Leo XIII's time, there was a movement called spiritualism. The followers of this movement held sessions, or seances as they called them, where they attempted to communicate with the dead in order to gain knowledge or predict the future. Judeo-Christians call this the sin of necromancy. An early method of the spiritualists used was alphabet calling. They recited the alphabet and waited for the spirits to make a sound, a rapping for example, at specific letters. The letters were gathered and grouped to form words. Obviously, this method took a long time to reveal any messages. Later, spiritualists placed their hands on a board or planchette which had a pencil poking through it. Supposedly, a spirit would guide the board to draw out markings with a pencil. A psychic deciphered the markings that were left. These spirit talking boards later developed into a form that would be easier to use and more popular with hundreds of others. 2 years after Pope Leo XIII had his vision, the first rough draft of the Ouija board came into existence. It was patented commercially 5 years later. At first, the Ouija board was seen as an innocent parlor game, but the Catholic Church realized the true power of this, quote, game. In 1919, the Church issued dire warnings and urged Christian households not to tolerate the board. This was because it was a form of divination. The book of Deuteronomy mentions, "Let no one be found among you who sacrifices his son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft or casts spells, or who is a medium or spiritualist, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord." Over the next decades, Catholic exorcists warned against using Ouija boards, saying demons will masquerade as departed loved ones as a means of gaining possession. Early 20th century history is filled with stories of people going insane, committing robbery or murder after using the Ouija board. Father Thomas Oitenauer, exorcist and author of Exorcism and the Church Militant, said that as many as 90% of the cases of possession he encountered began with a Ouija board. Yet despite these warnings, people still use the board, especially young people. This is in part due to the encouragement from toy companies, movies, and social media. It is terrifying to see young people delving into this dangerous practice with ignorant, carefree bravado, thinking they can take on the devil himself. According to the website Catholic.net, adolescent psychology wants to prove its limits, get out of the allowed, prove to society that he is different, show the group of other teenagers that he is courageous, risky, an adult. This is demonstrated by rites of passage with doing things forbidden and dangerous, and that includes the Ouija board. So, what is actually happening when one uses the Ouija board? When you place your hands on the Ouija board and ask it a question, you are allowing demons to control your free will and physically move your hands. God himself does not do this. He does not take over your free will. By giving up your free will to demons, you create a relationship with the demonic. You are allowing the demonic to control you. You are voluntarily allowing them to possess you. So back to my note that the Ouija board came into being 2 years after Pope Leo had his vision. Am I saying the Ouija board caused the gates of hell to crack open? No, I can't say that for sure. It's just that the time it came into being was a curious coincidence. Am I saying that the Ouija board is the sole reason that demons have been allowed to proliferate in our world more so than any previous centuries? Of course not. There are other reasons. We have atheism, witchcraft, satanism, ghost hunting, etc. All these have attracted demons into our world. But these actions have not been as numerous or as damaging as the Ouija board. The Ouija board is extremely popular. It has been around for nearly 140 years. Paranormal website iggypop.com gave a conservative estimate that around 20 million Ouija boards were sold within just the last 50 years. The site gave another conservative estimate of 1 million people a year using the board. Exorcists say that evil, that the demonic enters when given an invitation. So that is a lot of invitations. Other authors have described the Ouija board as a doorway to hell, as a portal to the world of the evil ones. Exorcist Father Carlos Martin says the fallen angels are beyond space and time. They are everywhere. So to use the terms doorways and portals is misleading. I'd like to think of demons as spiritual flies and occult objects and actions as the demonic magnets that attract these flies. Here's an even better visual. In Romans chapter 7, verse 24, it says, "Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death?" There's an interpretation of this verse that refers to a gruesome punishment that Roman tyrants decreed upon murderers. The convicted killer was shackled to the dead body of his victim. The poet Virgil wrote in the Aeneid, Book 8, line 485, "The living and the dead at his command were coupled face to face and hand to hand, till choked with stench and loath embraces tied, the lingering wretches pined away and died." The website BibleTools.com states, shackled to his victim eye to eye, hand to hand, waist to waist, and foot to foot, the murderer, still very much alive, was forced to live out the remainder of his life directly bearing the weight and the putrefying stench of the dead body. In time, of course, the rotting flesh of the corpse would become rife with disease, infecting the killer and leading to a most horrible and grisly end. When one performs occult practices like the Ouija board, it is like voluntarily attaching a corpse to you, allowing the demonic flies and maggots to feed on you, destroy your life, your home, and your loved ones. Even if you manage to cast the corpse out, the stench and disease remains. Removing it will not be an easy task.
Many people make a fundamental mistake. They think that they can open the door to evil, take a look at it, tickle its tummy, close the door, put it back on the shelf, and never have to worry about it again.
But when a person practices divination, for example, when there are some, like, for example, I've got one woman who practiced witchcraft for about 10 years. That's going to take a long time to get rid of those demons. She did this. She practiced witchcraft, and those spirits of divination are dug in, and it's going to be a fight. It's going to take a few years to get rid of them.
Yeah, there's this conception I've seen online when we posted some of the other clips from The Exorcist that people were like, no, it doesn't take years. It's quick. All you have to do is invoke Jesus and it's gone. And then, I don't know, is that ignorance? Is it, what is?
Yeah, it's ignorance. I mean, basically, we do this as part of our ministry day in and day out. And sometimes they are cast out quickly. But I wish it was that easy.
Yeah.
We have lots of kids. It can go anywhere from a couple sessions to we had one that took 5 years. She's doing fine now, but that she came from a family that performed abortions. It's a horrible crime, regardless of what people think. And she didn't do it, but her family was, and she was severely possessed. It took 5 years to get rid of them.